Good evening, everybody. Today, my talk is on clubfoot. You all know clubfoot is one of the common problems which we all deal in our day-to-day life, day-to-day practice. And as far as the students are concerned, it is one of the common cases that are kept for the exam. It may be an infant or a neonate with a clubfoot, or it may be a walking child with clubfoot, or it may be a neglected a child with clubfoot. So what is clubfoot? Clubfoot is a generic name that is given to any deformity in the lower limb where the foot looks like a club. Okay, so when the foot is looking like a club, you call it clubfoot. When it is the hand is affected and is having similar deformity, you call it club hand. If you look at the epidemiology of clubfoot, the incidence is said to be 1 to zero point 0.2 per thousand live births. And the prevalence, it is more in developing countries. If you look at the global epidemiology, it is interesting to note that approximately 200,000 new cases occur per year. Of this, 50,000 cases are contributed by India. So that means that one-fourth of the total new cases of clubfoot is coming from India. Still, we are following what the Westerners are telling. It is more common in boys, and the male to female ratio is 2:1. And 40% of these cases are bilateral. So, if you look at the etiology, we do not know the etiology, and it was considered to be a germplasm defect. But the most accepted theory is what is put forward by Ignacio Ponseti, that is retracting fibrosis. And some of the clubfoot, especially neuromuscular varieties of clubfoot, will have neuromuscular problems. And some genetic etiology has also been described recently. So it is said to be having a both genetic as well as environmental factors are involved. So if you look at the genetics of clubfoot, the incidence in first degree relative is approximately 2%. And the incidence in second degree relative is approximately 0.6%. If one monozygotic twin has clubfoot, the second has got a 32% chance of having clubfoot. And several chromosomal deletion regions, including this 2q3132, are associated with Talipes equinovarus and may harbor genes that contribute to the idiopathic variety of clubfoot. So if the mother comes and asks you, what's the chance of my second child having clubfoot? It is approximately 2%. So the most accepted theory is retracting fibrosis. What is this retracting fibrosis? It is the myofibrosis that occurs secondary to increased fibrous tissue in the muscles and ligaments. Ponseti found that collagen in all of the ligamentous and tendinous structures except the tendoachilles was loosely crimped and could be stretched. So on the medial side and on the posterior side, this area, posteromedial aspect, all the ligamentous and tendinous structures except the tendoachilles are loosely crimped and they are having this abnormality. But the tendoachilles cannot be stretched. Achilles tendon has tightly crimped collagen and was resistant to stretching. That is the basis of Ponseti method of treatment as far as the etiology is concerned. If you look at the pathology, the primary biological cause is retracting fibrosis of the connective tissue and may be related to abnormal myosin. And the deforming process lasts about 4 years and then ceases. So this is the area where you have got these abnormalities that is on the posteromedial aspect of the foot in an infant and a child's foot, and it persists for at the age of up to 4 years and then ceases. Therefore, the relapse is possible during the first 4 years of life. After that, the chance of relapse is much less. There are several classification systems. One easy classification is based on the cause. That is postural clubfoot. Second is idiopathic clubfoot. Then the secondary clubfoot and the syndromic clubfoot. So what is postural clubfoot? Postural clubfoot is mild clubfoot that is seen in a newborn baby, and it is mild and flexible. The deformity is correctable in your hands. If you look at the Pirani score, it will be 0, and there is no equinus deformity. It is usually due to intrauterine position. That is the definition of postural clubfoot. But some of these postural clubfoot may have mild varus and equinus, which may need 1 or 2 plasters. So usually the treatment is observe, and you tell the mother to stretch in the manner like this, and it gets corrected in a couple of weeks. What is idiopathic clubfoot? It is an isolated clubfoot in an otherwise normal child. That means you are doing a head to foot examination and and could not find any other reason for the development of clubfoot. Then you call it a idiopathic CTEV. Idiopathic clubfoot is called as congenital talipes equinovarus. The physical examination of the upper extremities, spine, lower extremities, and the neurological status are normal. Calf atrophy is usually present in idiopathic clubfoot. That is one thing which we cannot correct. Most of these children will have some atrophy of the calf. Then what is secondary clubfoot? My professor used to teach us it can be classified as neuropathic when there is spina bifida and other neurological abnormalities like meningocele, meningomyelocele, diastomatomyelia. Many of these will have clubfoot. Then you have got other neurological abnormalities like poliomyelitis and cerebral palsy, which can also present like clubfoot. Then the myopathic variety of clubfoot, the classical example is arthrogryposis multiplex congenita, as you see in this particular child with bilateral clubfoot. Then there is a variety called osteopathic, where the bones are affected. The commonest example is tibial hemimelia. When the medial support is lost, it can produce a deformity similar to that of clubfoot. Then there are various syndromes producing clubfoot, like Larsen syndrome, where the joints are very lax, or the whistling face syndrome, or the congenital constriction band syndrome. This is the classical whistling face syndrome. I got 2-3 families having this whistling face syndrome. Then this is the congenital constriction band syndrome. Now coming to neurogenic clubfoot, the commonest one is spina bifida. It is seen in 30 to 50% of spina bifida children. It commonly affects lumbar lesions, but you have to look at the thoracic lesion, look for thoracic lesions also. It is a rigid clubfoot with high risk of recurrence. And one important thing is when you put plaster, you should be aware that the sensation of the foot is decreased or absent. Therefore, there is a very high chance of skin breakdown in these cases. The foot sensation should be assessed in these children. Then amniotic band syndrome or street-ears dysplasia. This is a disorder of fetal development in which the amnion separates from the chorion and forms bands which encircle the limbs. The incidence is 12 to 56%. It produces rigid clubfoot with high chance of relapse. And it needs early surgery. You need to release the bands initially and then correct clubfoot. But there are several reports where both has been corrected surgically in a single sitting. Now, clubfoot in arthrogryposis, it is a very severe and rigid variety of clubfoot. The muscles are thin and often replaced by fat and fibrous tissue. So it is a very rigid variety of clubfoot, especially the distal type of distal variety of arthrogryposis and the so-called amyloplasia, which is the generalized variety, are having very severe clubfoot. The ligaments and capsular tissues are thickened and tight. There is absent skin creases around the joint, and the deformities are usually bilateral and rarely symmetrical. Now, syndromic clubfoot, one is street-ears dysplasia, where you have shown the amniotic bands, that is called as street-ears dysplasia. Then I have Mobius syndrome, where there is sixth nerve paralysis and the patient will be having spin. Then dystrophic dysplasia, the classical example is the hitchhiker's thumb. Then Freeman-Shelton syndrome or the whistling face syndrome, which can easily be diagnosed by looking at the face of the child. Then Larsen syndrome, which is the opposite of arthrogryposis, where the joints are very lax and they will have multiple joint subluxations and dislocations. So in the general examination, if you look at the cause, what will you look from the head in the head to foot examination? One is the dysmorphic facies, as I have shown in those cases with Freeman-Shelton syndrome. Abductor paralysis that is common in Mobius syndrome. So you can easily diagnose Mobius syndrome. The crumbled ear and the hitchhiker's thumb are the characteristic features of dystrophic dysplasia. In the even if you forget to do the first three things, the fourth thing is very important. That is the spine. Look for evidence of spina bifida. It may be a tuft of hair, it may be a dimple, or it may be a lipoma, or it may be a nevus. You look for all these things. Then in the joints, you look for both contracture as well as hypermobility. Contractures are commonly seen in arthrogryposis, and hypermobility is seen in Larsen syndrome. The nail patella syndrome is another cause. So you have to look at the nails also, whether there is any hypoplastic nails. In the thumb, I have already said regarding the hitchhiker's thumb, which is common in dystrophic dwarfism. And many of these dysplasias are having short stature, and you have to look at the anthropometric measurements of these child. Even though I have said all these, at least at the postgraduate level, you have to look at the spine and the various joints and exclude the other common causes of that may lead to clubfoot. Then based on the treatment, it can be classified as a corrected clubfoot or an uncorrected clubfoot. It can be relapsed, resistant, or neglected. Relapsed clubfoot means it has fully corrected, but it is coming back again. Resistant means even from the start, it is resistant to treatment and you are not able to get full correction. That is commonly seen in arthrogryposis and meningomyelocele and the syndromic variety of clubfoot. Neglected clubfoot is no treatment has been taken till the walking age. Some people consider up to 2 years. If no treatment is taken, you call it neglected clubfoot. Then relapse and recurrent clubfoot, a corrected clubfoot that later developed deformity. Then you call it a relapse or a recurrent clubfoot. The forefoot, it can either be a forefoot contracture, a forefoot relapse, where it can be dynamic or static. Dynamic means it is due to the overaction of the tibialis anterior. How will you look for this dynamic variety? You ask the patient the child to sit and dorsiflex the foot. You will find that the foot goes into varus due to the overaction of the tibialis anterior, which is on the medial side. Then you call it a dynamic variety. Static variety is the one when there is a varus when the child is standing. Then in the hind foot, you look for a heel varus or an equinus, or you may get a combination. So in relapse clubfoot, it can be either a forefoot relapse. The forefoot relapse can either be a dynamic relapse or a static relapse. The hindfoot relapse, which can either be a heel varus or equinus, or a combination of these cannot come. Neglected clubfoot means is a term that has been actually removed because WHO says that if you use the term neglected clubfoot, you are pointing the finger at somebody, maybe the parents or the caregivers. Therefore, the better term will be an untreated clubfoot. Clubfoot that has not been corrected before the child has started walking may present with severe contractures and bony deformities. Then another variety of clubfoot is what is called as the atypical clubfoot. Atypical clubfoot is a severe variety of clubfoot. The correction stops after 3 to 4 casts, and usually the casts fall off. So there are two theories regarding this. One, some people believe that it is an iatrogenic problem because the cast is falling off and or the toe disappears inside the cast. Therefore, at the angle where the ankle joint is, the half of the foot will be there, and therefore the distal part goes into a plantaris type of deformity or a foot plantar flexion deformity. So that is the reason for this atypical clubfoot. Others believe that it occurs de novo as an atypical variety of clubfoot. So it is a short foot. You will see a dorsiflex or cocked up great toe. You can see a deep transverse crease will be there. A deep transverse crease will be there. And the plantaris or the forefoot plantar flexion deformity. And there is an apparent tibial bowing is also there. So these are the features: short foot, cocked up great toe, transverse crease, deep transverse plantar crease, the forefoot plantar flexion, which is called as the plantaris deformity, and apparent tibial bowing. The treatment is slightly different from the normal Ponseti method. The method of manipulation is like this. You correct the plantaris deformity by putting pressure on the forefoot. So the first thing you have to do is to stop casting or give a cast holiday, because the foot is usually swollen in these cases, and therefore you have to give a cast holiday for 2 to 3 weeks. Then the great toe becomes longer, and then you start the manipulation by the tooth thumb technique, as you see in this particular case. And once the plantaris is corrected, then you continue with the Ponseti method of treatment. Therefore, what I have been trying to tell you is that the clubfoot is not a single entity. It is a spectrum ranging from postural clubfoot, that the CTV, neurogenic clubfoot, syndromic clubfoot. Then you have got the relapsed clubfoot, the atypical clubfoot, the neglected clubfoot, and there is another variety where relapses occurred after surgical treatment, which Ponseti initially called as the complex variety of clubfoot. Then if you look at the radiology nowadays, with the Ponseti method of treatment, radiology has become become less important. Previously, when we were doing surgical treatment, we used to do these X-rays. So you look at the talocalcaneal angle. The normal talocalcaneal angle in AP and lateral views, you know, is between 20 and 40 degrees. Therefore, here there will be decrease in the talocalcaneal angle, both in the AP and the lateral view. And the sum of talocalcaneal angle in the AP and lateral view is called as the talocalcaneal index. So with the Ponseti method of treatment, this has become obsolete and very few people rely on X-rays. But still there are some indications for taking the X-ray. One thing is, suppose you are continuing with the treatment in an elder child with Ponseti method, and if correction is not obtained, it may be because of a tarsal coalition, which can be detected in an X-ray. That is one indication. The second indication is, in some of these relapsed clubfoot, they may be having a flat top talus, which can also be seen in an X-ray. So here you can see there is a coalition between the cuboid and the talus. So if you continue with the Ponseti method of correction, you cannot obtain a good correction. Now coming to pathoanatomy, the 4 words which you should always remember is cave, cavus, adductus, varus, and equinus. Cavus means there is an increased arch of the foot. Adductus means it is the forefoot adduction. This occurs at the level of the midfoot. Then varus of the hindfoot and equinus of the hindfoot. So these are the 4 deformities which you should not forget. Then these are the other things which can be seen. This picture is from Ponseti's book. If you look at the talus, the talar neck is inclined medially. There is severe medial displacement of the navicular. Here, if you look carefully, you can see this is the head of the talus. So the navicular has displaced over the head of the talus medially, and distance between the medial malleolus and the navicular is decreased. So the navicular has become very near the medial malleolus. So some people initially believed that this is the primary deformity in clubfoot, where there is a subluxation of the talonavicular joint. The navicular becomes wedge shaped. You can see the wedge shape of the navicular. Then the cuboid also is medially displaced. So the calcaneum again is bowed medially and it is wedge-shaped distal calcaneal articular surface. A adducted and inverted calcaneum under the head of the talus, under the talus, and wedge-shaped head of the talus. These are the various pathoanatomical features. So if you can remember this diagram, you can easily write the various points regarding the pathoanatomy. What is happening to the talus? The talus is displaced medially. Then the head of the talus has become wedge-shaped. What has happened to the navicular? Again wedge-shaped, and there is a talonavicular subluxation. In the calcaneum, it has become bean-shaped, and the head of the anterior part is curving towards the medial side. The navicular is again displaced medially, and it has also become wedge-shaped. So you will be able to write a few points regarding the pathoanatomy if you remember this photograph. So these soft tissue leads to bony deformity. So actually what is happening in children is that there is a soft tissue abnormality due to the retracting fibrosis that is seen mainly in the posterior and medial aspect of the foot. And this leads to, if not corrected properly, leads to bony deformities in an older child. The biomechanics, I will not go into the details, but one or two points I want to stress. That is, you should know the concept of acetabulum pedis. There is a acetabulum in the foot where the head of the talus forms the is similar to the head of the femur, and the acetabulum is formed by the navicular as well as the subtalar joint. So the Ponseti technique is effective because it takes the advantage of the kinematics of the subtalar joint. So Ponseti divides the foot into two parts. One is the talus and the second is the calcaneopedal block. Calcaneopedal block contains all the bones of the foot except the talus. The entire forefoot moves with the calcaneum around the talus. So the correction of the hind and the midfoot can be accomplished by abducting the forefoot. So if you abduct the forefoot with the fulcrum or your thumb over the head of the talus, the whole deformity in clubfoot can be corrected. This is the basis. So here, what is happening is the adducted, inverted, adduction, inversion, and flexion. So this is a clubfoot. So this is the neutral. So when you, what you want to do is to make this deformity into this one, where there is abduction, inversion, and extension. So Ponseti methods follows the normal kinematics of the subtalar joint, where when you abduct, abduction of the forefoot or the abduction of the calcaneopedal block with the fulcrum over the head of the talus, the foot goes from a position of adduction, inversion, and flexion to abduction, inversion, and extension. So that is the basic principle or the basic biomechanics of the Ponseti method of treatment. How will you assess the severity of clubfoot? There are several ways to assess it. The Carroll method, the Ponseti and Smalley methods, Harold and Walker method, Goldner method, Cattrall. I don't think you need to remember all these. The one thing which you should know in detail is the Pirani, and the second thing by name is the DiMeglio technique. The DiMeglio, in most of the situations, it is used only for research purpose, and what is practically used is the Pirani scoring system. So as postgraduates, you should be thorough with the Pirani scoring system. So it was formulated by Dr. Shafiq Pirani. Actually, he is an Indian who has settled down in Canada now. It's a reliable method for assessing the amount of deformity in congenital clubfoot. It is easy to use and it is inter-observer reliable and valid. You need less than 1 minute to do a Pirani scoring. It consists of two parts. One is the midfoot score and the hindfoot score. And each of these is 0 when there is no abnormality, 0.5 when there is mild abnormality, and 1 where there is severe abnormality. The 3 points you should look for is the curved medial border, the medial crease, and the position of the lateral part of the head of the talus. In the hindfoot score, again it is posterior creases, the rigid equinus, and the empty heel. So the midfoot score is between 0 to 3, the hindfoot score is 0 to 3, and the total score is 6. So this is the curved medial border. These pictures are again taken from the Ponseti manual. And if the medial border is straight, that is 0. If there is a mild curve distal in the distal part of the foot, that is at the tarso metatarsal joint, you call it 0.5. And if there is a proximal curve at the calcaneal at the level of the calcaneal cuboid joint, you call it as 1. So 0, 0.5 and 1. Medial crease, you slightly stretch the foot into some correction, and if there are fine multiple creases, small creases here, you call it 0. If there is 1 or 2 deep crease, that is 0.5, and there is a deep crease that causes change in the contour of the arch, and the depth cannot be seen. So there is a deep crease which has already affected the contour of the arch of the foot, as in this particular case, you call it 1. Then the third thing is the palpation of the head of the talus. How will you palpate the head of the talus? You move your finger anteriorly from the lateral malleolus, and the first bony landmark which you feel is the head of the talus. How will you confirm it? You abduct the foot. You can see the navicular going over the head of the talus. If the navicular completely reduces and the talar head cannot be felt, then you call it 0. The navicular partially reduces and the lateral head is less palpable, you call it 0.5. And the navicular does not reduce and the lateral head can be felt, then you call it 1. In the posteriorly or the hindfoot score, 1 is the emptiness of the heel. At 45-degree angle, you press over the calcaneum. Your finger should be at 45-degree with the foot in mild dorsiflexion. The tuberosity of the calcaneum is easily palpable, as if you are looking at the forehead with your finger. So if you palpate the forehead, you find that the bone is easily palpable. Then you call it 0. If the tuberosity of the calcaneum is more difficult to palpate, as you look at the tip of the nose. So bone is palpable, but it is at the depth, then you call it 0.5. And the tuberosity of the calcaneum is not palpable as you palpate on your thenar eminence. When you palpate on the thenar eminence, you find that you will not be able to feel the bone. That is considered as 1. Then severity of the posterior crease, similar to that of the medial crease, multiple fine creases, 0. 1 or 2 deep creases, it is 0.5. And deep crease that change the contour, as you see here, then you call it 1. And the last one is the rigidity of the equinus. You extend the knee and the angle is maximally dorsiflex. Normally, there should be 10 to 20 degree of dorsiflexion, then you call it 0. But if the angle dorsiflexes beyond neutral, but not fully, 5 to 10, around 0 to 5 degree dorsiflexion is there. Some dorsiflexion is there, but not up to the normal, then you call it 0.5. And if you cannot dorsiflex the angle to neutral, you call it 1. So that is how you do the Pirani scoring system. The modified Pirani was the original one where he used the 10 different variables. Now it is not used commonly. And there are modifications of Pirani scoring system for elder children. And again, that is not very useful. That is mainly used for research purposes. But as postgraduate students, you should know the classical Pirani scoring system and how to score a clubfoot. Because if you get a case of clubfoot, that is very often asked regarding the Pirani scoring system. Second thing is the assessment of severity of the clubfoot can be asked as one of your questions. Now coming to the next part, the treatment. So what is the aim of the treatment? It is slightly different from the aim of the treatment which we were studying years back. Here, you want to achieve a foot with appearance and function that is nearly normal, not anatomically 100% normal, but it should be nearly normal. But it remain normal in appearance and function throughout the lifetime. What Ponseti has learned from his long experience is that those cases where treated surgically had an anatomically good shape of the foot, but the foot becomes very rigid and painful in later life. Therefore, he followed up these two cases up to the age of 40s and 50s and found that the conservative method is having a better result. So the methods are conservative method of treatment, the kite, Ponseti, and Bensazel technique. There is a French technique where the physiotherapist, do the correction daily along with strapping. Then you have got the surgical methods. One is the Turco method where all size fits all. That means he has got a routine method of release. And the second is the a la carte method. That is, you do the release uh, that is what is needed to get a plantigrade foot. Then you have got the external fixation method of treatment, that is the Jess and the Elizabeth. So these are the various methods of treatment in a primary club foot. So Ponseti era was a silent revolution. He was a Spanish doctor who worked in Spain, Mexico, and later settled down in USA. And what his important thing was, there was a shift from surgical to the conservative method of treatment. So he became disillusioned with the results of surgery. He conducted extensive anatomical studies, analyzed the kinematics of the foot, and he devised his technique in 1940s. What he said in his paper in 1996, a well-conducted orthopedic treatment. So what is Ponseti's method of treatment? It is a well-conducted orthopedic treatment based on sound understanding of the functional anatomy of the foot and on the biological response of young connective tissue and bone to changes in the direction of mechanical stimuli can gradually reduce and almost eliminate all the deformities in most clubfoot. These are from the Ponseti's article. So what is Ponseti method of treatment? So he said that our patients treated 25 to 42 years ago, it was found that although the treated clubfoot was less supple than the normal feet, there was no significant difference in the function or the performance compared to the population of similar age born with a normal feet. So he followed up these cases for 25 to 45 years and came to the conclusion that even though there was slight variation from the normal, functionally the foot was normal, the foot was supple, the foot was not having any pain. So it is a specific method of manipulation, a specific method of casting, a percutaneous tenotomy of the tendoachilles because the crimp is not there. The collagen is tightly packed in the tendoachilles and it will not yield to stretching. It is followed by a specific method of bracing and long-term follow-up for looking for recurrence and a specific method of treating recurrence also. These are the 6 steps: specific manipulation, the specific casting method, tenotomy, bracing, follow-up for recurrence, and if recurrence occurred, a specific method of treating recurrence. We'll go through these. So serial casting using a strictly defined technique, tendoachilles tenotomy, and in some cases where there is relapse, especially the dynamic forefoot relapse, you do a tibialis anterior transfer uh, in children over 2.5 years of age. So when will you, the next question is, a newly born child is coming to you for treatment. When will you start treatment? Begin treatment in the first days of life so that you can take full advantage of the fibroelastic properties of the connective tissue. It results in better when it is started early. So I usually, even in day one, if I get a neonate, I'll put a plaster. But there are people who wait for a couple of weeks because the skin becomes much more healthy during that time, and there is no disadvantage for doing that. Especially if the child is coming from a far off place, it is much better to wait for 1 week, ask the mother to manipulate, and bring the child after 1 week, and then do the casting. The three important steps. One is correcting the cavus. Cavus is corrected by elevating the first grade and bring it to the proper alignment of the hind foot. Then adduction is corrected by abducting the entire foot under the talus with the foot in slight supination. So first you elevate the first ray to correct the cavus. Then in this position you start abducting. When you correct the cavus, what is happening is the forefoot is aligned with the hind foot, and only in this position you should start abducting the foot. And third is the angle equinus. You should not try to correct the angle equinus by dorsiflexing the foot, because it produces a break in the metatarsal joint and leads to a rocker bottom feet. Therefore, it should be corrected by tenotomy. The percentage of tenotomy is usually in our series, it is more than 95% and reaching around 100%. So this picture is also taken from Ponseti's book. This is what is happening. A rigid clubfoot, after each of these casts, it becomes straighter, straighter, and after tenotomy, it becomes almost normal. So step one is locate the head of the talus. I have already said. Your reference point is the lateral malleolus and the distal fibula. The head of the talus is just anterior to the lateral malleolus, and feel for the movements of the navicular on the talus. So you palpate here and then abduct it. You can see the navicular moving over the head of the talus. So cavus correction is by elevating the first ray, as you see in this particular slide. You just elevate the first ray. The first metatarsal is more flexion than the other metatarsal, thus causing the cavus. The cavus is corrected by elevating the first metatarsal, and this supinate the forefoot. Again, the same picture. What in one of these child, you just elevating it, and the cavus is getting correct. Once it is cavus is getting corrected, what you do is you start abducting. The fulcrum is over the head of the talus. In the kites method, it was over the calcaneocuboid joint. But once the calcaneocuboid joint is pressed, so the calcaneum cannot rotate from underneath the talus. Therefore, the kites method failed. It was successful only in his hands. In this position, the forefoot is abducted under the talus, and the counter pressure is applied on the lateral aspect of the head of the talus. The heel should not be touched. The heel should remain free to rotate. The medial tarsal ligaments are stretched, allowing the calcaneum to abduct underneath with the foot. And the anterior tuberosity of the calcaneum is disengaged from the position under the head of the talus. The calcaneum is severely adducted, flexed, and inverted. I am repeating the same words. The calcaneum is adducted, flexed, and inverted under the talus. So when you are doing this, the abduction, it gets abducted, extended, and everted. When the calcaneum abducts, it simultaneously extends, everts to its normal neutral position under the talus. So there is no need for separately correcting the heel varus. When the forefoot deformity is corrected, the heel automatically gets corrected in Ponseti method. Before each cast is applied, the foot is manipulated. The heel is not touched to allow the calcaneum to abduct. So these are some of the steps. Actually, these pictures are taken from the Ponseti's book, and this is his own hand of Ignacio Ponseti doing the manipulation. So again, the molding is again, you see the calcaneum is not touched. He is molding just beneath the medial and the lateral malleolus. Always apply an above knee cast, toes to the groin with the knee in 90-degree flexion. The heel varus, there is no need to separately correct the heel varus. As you see here, the heel is in varus when the foot and the calcaneum is adducted. The heel varus is corrected by abducting the forefoot. You are just abducting the forefoot and the heel is getting corrected. Cast removal. The cast should not, you should not allow the parents to remove the cast the previous day. It should be done only in your clinic, because the considerable correction will be lost when from the time of cast removal until the new one is applied. How will you remove it? You wet the plaster and teach the mother how to remove the cast. So in your notes or discharge notes, when you are sending these children, you should write that what care should be given for this care of the cast, what are the warning signs, and again that you have taught the parents how to remove the cast. Because in the middle of the night, if the child cries, there is no need for these parents to carry the child all the way to a hospital to remove the cast. Don't use the plaster cutting saw. The complication one is pressure sores, which can occur, especially if you are not, if you use constant pressure in a particular area, especially over the head of the talus, it can produce sores in that area. If the cast is loose and if the knee is not flexed to 90 degree, the foot will disappear inside the cast or the disappearing toes. This can lead to atypical club foot. This leads to what is called as an iatrogenic atypical club foot. So if you start dorsiflexing the foot, what is happening is in a small child, it will produce a break in the midfoot, which leads to a rocker bottom deformity. Then crowding of the toes can also occur. Then coming to equinus correction, it is done by using a Achilles tenotomy, usually done under local anesthesia. It is required in more than 90% of the cases. So you give a little bit lignocaine or sensocaine here, and then you do the tenotomy. You will get a snapping sound, and it can easily get corrected. When I was working in the government sector, I was using local anesthetics, but now in the private sector, I get the help of the anesthetist also for doing this procedure, because you will feel much more comfortable when the anesthetist is around. Then you give a cast, groin to toe cast in full correction, at least 10 degree of dorsiflexion, and this will be continued for 3 weeks. What is the indication for tenotomy? When the midfoot score is below 1 and the hindfoot score is more than 1. That means the forefoot deformity is almost corrected and the hindfoot deformity is not corrected. When there is less than 15 degree of dorsiflexion and not less than 70 degree of foot abduction, and the heel is invalgus. So you have to correct the other parts of the clubfoot deformity before going to do the tenotomy. The tenotomy technique I have already said. And another thing is it should be done not much lower down, because you may be cutting the calcaneum. So it should be 1 centimeter above the calcaneum, and the calcaneum is high riding because of the equinus. And if not careful, you will be cutting the calcaneum instead of the tendoachilles. So these things I have already said. You apply the cast in 10 to 15 degrees of dorsiflexion, and you give around 70 degree abduction. Why 70 degree? Because the infant's foot will be having that much amount of abduction, and neonate will be having that much amount of abduction. As the age increases, the amount of abduction decreases. Therefore, you should not aim for 70 degree abduction in a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old child. It will be much less. The final cast is worn for 3 weeks. After that, you go into the bracing. So what happens to the tendoachilles once you cut it? There will be complete regeneration of the tendoachilles within 3 weeks. There is no reported case of Achilles incompetence, no reports of infection, and there are rare cases of bleeding has occurred. This is because the peroneal artery may be having some anomalies in the lower limb. Sometimes the tibialis posterior may be absent. It may be the thickened peroneal artery, which which goes underneath the Achilles tendon, and this can produce some bleeding. So you should watch for that. The bracing, the common brace that is used is the Steenbeek brace. So it is a foot abduction orthosis set at 45 degrees of external rotation for the normal feet and 70 degrees for the external rotation for the affected feet. For bilateral cases, in a very small infant, you give 70 degrees of external rotation. I have already said, as the age increases, you need to reduce the amount of external rotation. How long, what's the period? 23 hours per day for the first 3 months, and then night and nap time bracing. When the child is sleeping, you put the brace after 3 months. So what are the peculiarities of these brace? It is an open shoe without any sole, then the straight medial border and 15-degree dorsiflexion bend for the rod, and the width should be the 1 inch more than the shoulder width, and it has got a low heel counter. Here you can see the heel counter is much lower, and there is an opening on the medial side for the mother who is carrying the child to look at the heel of the child to make sure that the heel is touching the sole. There are other articulated braces available, the Dobbs brace, the Mitchell-Ponseti brace, or the Spirolac FO. There are so many other braces are available, but the new one brace that may be asked for you is the what has been developed by Professor Risha Madhuri from Vellore, that is the Padmapada brace, which is again a very useful one, which I have been using during at least 40-50 braces I have already used. The compliance with the bracing protocol is the most important thing, and you should remember that the most challenging aspect of Ponseti method of treatment is to maintain the compliance of the bracing protocol. So in the Padmapada brace, they have got a sensor. So even if the parents are telling that the child has been using the brace, if you take this sensor and you put it in the computer, you can find out the period during which the child was wearing the brace. Then recognizing and managing relapse. The relapse can occur. In most of the relapses occur in the first 2 years of life, 80%, and it is uncommon after 4 years. Ponseti said that the abnormality and the posteromedial aspect of the foot is a temporary thing, and it will last only for 4 years. So the relapse is extremely uncommon after 4 years. The relapse must be recognized and treated early. Why relapse? The most common cause is the failure to use the brace. Failure to gain full abduction during the corrective phase. Overactive tibialis anterior, the growth spurt, and some unknown causes. How to prevent it? Strict adherence to the bracing protocol. And stretching of the Achilles tendon, teach the parents to stretch the foot into dorsiflexion every day. And third thing is squatting exercises. If the child, in an older child, you ask the child to squat, because for normal squatting, you require 15 to 20 degree of dorsiflexion, and therefore the Achilles tendon gets stretched. Recognizing relapse, you observe the child while standing, squatting, and walking, and do the Perani scoring system. Feel the foot, measure the dorsiflexion, and stroke the sole of the foot, and look for the supination. That is to find out the overactive. If you stroke the foot, if the foot is going towards the medial side, that means that there is an overactive tibialis anterior. Can either be a hind foot relapse, this is just a repetition, that is varus relapse or an equinus relapse. So this is a heel varus relapse. Then you may get a forefoot relapse, as you see in this particular case, which can be a static or dynamic, or it can be a combined. The treatment, again, you follow the same principle. You recast these children. 1 to 3 casts may be necessary, and if there is if there is any equinus, you redo the tenotomy and then continue with the bracing. Encourage stretching and squatting exercises. In the dynamic supination in an older child, see, you have to wait till the lateral cuneiform bone has been formed, and it usually forms by around the age of 2.5 to 3 years. So for that, you do a tibialis anterior transfer. The third cuneiform ossifies by 2.5 years, and then you can do a transfer of tibialis anterior tendon. Unlike in CP, here you cerebral palsy, you transfer the whole of the tendon in cases of club foot. And along with that, you may have to do a repeat Achilles tenotomy. So this is how it is taken. The tibialis anterior tendon is taken from its insertion. Then it is transferred towards the medial side. You make a drill hole over the third cuneiform and fix it there with a pull-out suture. Usually this gives excellent results. Now coming to surgical treatment of clubfoot. I will not go in very detail regarding the surgical treatment of clubfoot, but a few slides regarding that. One, what are the indications? A severe rigid clubfoot, failure of conservative treatment. Many of the syndromic clubfoot, we start with Ponseti method, but if it fails, we go for surgical treatment. Neuropathy clubfoot, again, we will start with Ponseti method, then if necessary, do surgical treatment. Relapse and neglected clubfoot. So it can be divided depending on the age of the child. Below 3 years, you do soft tissue procedures, mainly soft tissue procedures, that is the post-promedial release. The only bony surgery that can be done at this age group is the Gracie technique or the cuboid decancellation. Above the age of 3 years, you do bony surgery. The commonest one was the Dillwyn-Evans procedure. Nowadays, we follow treat most of these by just technique, and in an older child by Elisaro technique. Above the age of 12 years, you do the triple arthrodesis just for the Elisaro. So when you get a rigid clubfoot, so what you do, rigid clubfoot, you do the Ponseti technique. This is Ponseti technique. If the correction is there, bracing and correction is maintained. If there is a relapse, you again redo the Ponseti technique. If there is only partial correction, you do the surgical method. And if there is no correction, again the surgical method of treatment. So what are the methods? Soft tissue release, Dillwyn-Evans procedure, calcaneal osteotomy, tibialis anterior transfer, tarsal osteotomies, triple arthrodesis, just Elisaro. So this is the list of commonly done surgical procedures done for clubfoot. I have told you the indications for doing that. The commonest one is a post-promedial release, which you should know. The Dillwyn-Evans you should know. The triple arthrodesis you should know. And the JESS is another common method. The talectomy is rarely done nowadays. Previously, in severe clubfoot, we used to do a talectomy, especially in arthrogrypotic children. The post-promedial release is the current accepted surgical procedure in clubfoot. The examiner will ask you which are the structures that are released posteriorly, medially, on the plantar aspect, and on the lateral aspect, and you will have to study this. Posteriorly, the tendoachilles, posterior capsule of the ankle and subtalar joint. Medially, you do lengthening of the tibialis posterior, FHL and FDL tendon, capsule of the subtalar joint, talonavicular joint, and naviculocuneiform joint. On the plantar side, you release the plantar fascia, the spring ligament, the bifurcate ligament, and the knot of Henle. That is the crossing between the FHL and the FDL underneath the navicula. This is called as the knot of Henle that is to be released. And this is a very important point. The interosseous talocalcaneal ligament is always left intact. You should not touch this ligament. If you cut this ligament, it is almost sure that the foot goes into valgus. The tendons are repaired to tight to avoid post-operative weakness. So this is one of the cases which we did. I will not go into the details. So you can see how extensive this surgery is. You have to do the release of all these structures. And when you look at the method of Ponseti, this is a much more traumatic procedure for a small child than the Ponseti method of treatment. So the golden time for the surgical method of treatment was between 1970s and 1990s, where Turco came up with his technique. Then came Simmons' Cincinnati method, the McKay's technique, Goldner and Fitch technique, Carroll technique. All these are principle is the same. You release everything. You release everything. In some cases, you release the interosseous talocalcaneal ligament. Only later they found that it leads to severe opposite deformities. So complications are wound healing problems. Vascular complications can occur because you are correcting it and fixing with K-bias in many cases. Undercorrection in the form of persistent equinus, forefoot adduction, and hindfoot, whereas overcorrection is much more difficult, the planovalgus feet, stiff and painful feet. So, in these cases, rigid and neglected clubfoot. Again, you can repeat the soft tissue release. You can do Dillwyn Evans procedure, calcaneal osteotomy, tibialis anterior transfer, triple arthrodesis, Jess and Elisa. So, apart from soft tissue release for a rigid and a neglected or a relapsed clubfoot, these were the surgical methods that were employed nowadays. Now, personally, I have stopped doing all these procedures, only two procedures which I do, three procedures, tibialis anterior transfer, triple arthrodesis, and Jess. What is Dillwyn Evans procedure? It consists of two steps. One is a medial soft tissue release. That is mainly for lengthening the medial column. So what is the basic problem in clubfoot? There is a short medial column and a long lateral column. So you need to lengthen the medial column and shorten the lateral column. So lengthening of the medial column is done by a medial soft tissue release. And shortening of the lateral column is done by taking a wedge from the calcaneocuboid joint. So you take a wedge from the calcaneocuboid joint and correct it. Some people take a wedge from the anterior aspect of the calcaneum also. Then it is called as the Lichbros technique. So cuboid decancellation is one procedure. This is cuboid decancellation, where you expose the cuboid, curate out all the cancellous bone from inside, and then correct the deformity. The cuboid just collapses. Then Lichbros technique, I have already said, you remove the anterior aspect of the calcaneum. Then heel varus is corrected by a calcaneal osteotomy. Previously, it was a wedge is taken from the lateral side. Now it is a medial displacement osteotomy, the lateral displacement osteotomy of the calcaneum. That is how you correct this heel varus. Then some other techniques are also there. One is what is called as the McHale and Lenhardt technique. The principle is the same. What you want to do is lengthen the medial column and shorten the lateral column. So you take a wedge of bone from the lateral side, that is the cuboid. You make an opening on the medial cuneiform. You distract it and put the same wedge here, so that the medial side is lengthened and the lateral side is shortened. But what happens in a young child is the bone is very soft, and when you try to do this, the bone just collapses. This is called as the McHale and Lenhardt technique. Then many of these cases of clubfoot is associated with torsional deformities also. The internal tibial torsion is commonly seen, and in those cases, even after full correction of the foot, if there is an intoeing gait, you can do a rotational osteotomy of the tibia. And in severe cases, for correcting the equinus, you can even do a dorsiflexion osteotomy of the tibia. So one thing which we are doing is nowadays is, if the foot is not getting corrected by Ponseti technique, we straight away do the Jess method of treatment. In our hands, it is giving excellent results. Elisaro in an older child, we use the Elisaro technique, but it is technically more difficult. Probably Jayant will be doing the more of Elisaro. I usually do this. Just even for teenagers, it is giving good result to me. Triple arthrodesis is another procedure for skeletally immature child, where you fuse the subtalar joint, talonavicular joint, and the calcaneal cuboid joint. So this is the wedges that are taken, and you correct the deformity. Previously, we used to use staples. Nowadays, we use screws for fixing these bones. And the only problem is one joint usually goes into pseudarthrosis. The examiner may ask you which is the joint that goes into pseudarthrosis. It is the talonavicular joint. Thank you very much. Gopal, I have finished.
Thank you, sir. There are no questions from students, sir.
We got the.
Thank you very much, sir. Because again, this is, as far as I am concerned, clear concise concept clearing, a very huge topic, but in a nutshell way, a lot of concepts got cleared. Thank you very much for that, sir. Teachers.
Sir,
That's what we say to you. Yes, sir, Shivananda, sir.
Gopal,
Yes,
say
sir.
all the time in the examinations they are asking Pirani score, how much age it is applied, and
Yes, sir. Yes,
Pirani
sir has.
score application.
Okay, sir. Gopa Kumar, sir.
Yeah.
Shivananda, sir is asking
Age
applicability
limit
of
for the
Pirani score.
Pirani scoring, sir.
Usually
Yes, sir.
up to 1 year, but after that, many of these things like the medial crease and the posterior crease disappear. So it is not applicable, but there are several modifications which are given in the literature which you can use it. But as far as the exam is concerned, the exam is concerned, there is no harm in telling that the assessment is by Pirani scoring system. The others are not very popular.
Yes, sir. Shivananda, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Because as far as the postgraduates are concerned, if they teach them too many things, they will get confused. They should
Yes, sir.
know the basics.
Sir, there is one question
Yes,
from
sir.
student, sir. So what is dynamic supination?
Dynamic supination, in many of these cases, they will have an overacting tibialis anterior. Therefore, when the child is walking, during the swing phase of the gait, the forefoot goes into varus. When the child is standing, the varus becomes less. How will you identify that? In an young child, you stroke the sole of the foot. When you stroke the sole of the foot, you find that the foot dorsiflexes. If it is going medially, that means that there is an overacting tibialis anterior. So if in an older child, you ask the child to sit on the chair and ask the child to dorsiflex the foot. If it is going medially, because on the normal side, it goes straight upward. On the affected side, it goes medially. That again means that the tibialis anterior is overactive. In these cases, the tibialis anterior transfer gives very good results.
Sir, thank you, sir. Sir, students, you have already explained, but still students want recurrent club foot and relapse club foot clarification, difference between the two.
So these things are asked by examiners, some examiners, but nowadays the concept is that both are the same. Recurrent and relapsed is most of the same. And it hardly matters as far as the practicability is concerned, these terms. So I don't think you need to do the hair splitting between relapse and the recurrent. Both it is corrected. Uh, some people say that a corrected club foot, if it recurs, it is called as a recurrent club foot. But relapse means if is almost the same. So I don't know why there should be a difference between these two. And it is not given in any of the Ponseti manual. The difference
Sir,
between these two.
sir, in Pirani score, what should be the hind foot and mid foot score as sternotomy indication?
See, if the forefoot score is the midfoot score should be below 1 and the hindfoot score should be above 1. That is the indication for sternotomy.
Thank you, sir. There are no more questions in the chat box, sir. Sir, a Pirani score is checked after putting foot in correctable position or without it.
Usually in mild correction is necessary.
Right, sir. There are no more questions, sir.
Okay, thank you.
How to examine varus in less than 1 year child?
So you can look at in a small infant, you will be able to look at the foot, isn't it? From the back as well as from the front. So you will be able to find the varus in small babies. Even small babies, you will be able to find out the amount of varus. Because in all these babies, you have to look from the front, look from the back, and look from the sole.
Right, sir.
Then from the medial side as well as the lateral side. In an older child, with the child standing, you first start with the back, then to the front, then medial, then lateral, and so. With this, you
Right, sir.
easily find out whether there is any forefoot and
Right, sir.
the stick. Neurogenic markers should be looked for in the back. Second thing is, in a neurogenic clubfoot, you find that if you stop the sole of the foot, the child will not be dorsiflexing the foot. See, many of these children, I have got at least 4 or 5 children who were treated as idiopathic clubfoot, came at a later date after treatment and find it to be detected as neurogenic, because I always do this stroke the sole of the foot, because the child, if when you do that, the child should be dorsiflexing the foot. If it is not dorsiflexing, that means that there is some neurological problem. Then the next thing is neurogenic clubfoot is much more rigid and more prone for recurrence. So examination of the spine, examination of the sensation of the sole of the foot by stroking, examination of the motor again by doing this in a small child, and the chance of recurrence. These are the 4 ways by which you find out whether it is neurogenic or not.
Right. Sir, what do you mean by stroking?
You just, with your thumb, you just, as if you are doing the plantar reflex,
Right, sir.
you stroke the sole of the foot, that's all.
Right, sir. Sir, there is one more question regarding while taking X-ray, maximum plantar flexion for anteroposterior view of the foot and ankle. For ankle, it is maximum dorsiflexion in lateral view. Is it right, sir?
Yes, that was right, because nowadays nobody takes X-rays for because in Ponseti's method of treatment, X-ray is never mentioned. I
Right.
usually take the X-ray only for relapse to find 2 things, like I've already said, coalitions, and in late cases to find out whether there is any bony changes like the flat top talus.
Right, sir.
But for the theory aspect, you should know what is the talocalcaneal index. This is done in maximum dorsiflexion, but you need separate boards for taking these X-rays in full dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. And these were done when we were PGs, and one of the PG was doing a thesis on the radiological aspect of clubfoot. Now nobody does it.
Right, sir. Shivananda, sir, anything else you want? Shivananda, sir, unmute. Unmute, sir, unmute. Shivananda, sir, unmute.
In the exam, students should know about the counseling or not, sir?
Pardon? Counseling.
Counseling about CTEV.
Yeah, because see, the first thing the parents usually ask is, what is the chance of my next child developing clubfoot? So I have said in the genetics, it is roughly around 2%. Then regarding the counseling, regarding the plaster, because you should tell that this is what you are going to do. You may require 4 to 6 hours, then the foot becomes normal, and in all these cases you require a tenotomy, which many people do it under local or in a short sedation, and then you will have to continue that plaster for another 3 weeks, followed by tracing. Okay? You should counsel that. Then regarding the plaster checks, that is how to look for the color of the toes, they should do when the child is incessantly crying during the night time, and how to remove the plaster in the middle of the night if it is necessary. All these things should be taught to the parents.
Sir, any specific reason for 3 weeks last plaster cast after tenotomy?
Because as Ponseti has said that when you keep it fully stretched, that length will be maintained. That is, the term he used was crimp. So you stretch it, keep it for a week, then again stretch it, keep it for 1 week. After tenotomy, you are keeping in full dorsiflexion that is possible, and correction of cavus as well as the adduction. So that is the reason why you keep it for a longer period. for about 3 weeks. During that time, the wound heals. Second thing is, I have already said, the tender Achilles regenerates during this period, 3 weeks. Ultrasound studies have shown that the tender Achilles regenerates. So it is much better
Yes,
to
sir.
use foot tools.
Thank you, sir. I think no more questions now. Thank you very much.